Welcome back, everybody, to That's DPI. I'm Zach, and that's Tyler down there, and we are getting into something that we're really excited about. So, right around the corner is the NFL schedule release. May 14th is when the NFL will release all of their primetime games, all of the matchups. We know the opponents, but we don't know when the opponents will play each other. And kind of, to get anticipation of the schedule release, we wanted to cover a debate that definitely came to a head this past season that Tyler and I have been kind of having back and forth for the last couple of months of what was the most anticipated regular season NFL game in history. Not best, I mean, because that probably goes to Chiefs Rams back in 2018. We're talking game that had the most hype going into it, biggest stakes, um, and the game that really made this argument come to a head was Week 18 Lions Vikings this past season. But we'll get more into that game in a moment. First, before we get into any games, I'm going to throw it to Tyler, allow him to present some criteria for what we believe would make up the greatest game in NFL, a regular season, the most anticipated regular season game in NFL history. Go ahead, Tyler.
So what started this was a tweet that said, "Is this Lions Vikings game the biggest game in NFL history?" And Zach came to me. We had a bit of debate, and my thing right off the bat was I said I can't imagine that in the entire history of the NFL there's not a game bigger. And so we put in some specific criteria to help us investigate this question of is this the biggest game, or if not, what is? And number one is playoff stakes. It is not a big game if it has no playoff stakes. This needs to be very impactful when it comes to whoever wins their spot in the playoffs. This also has the criteria of win percentage. So an example is this last game, it was 214 and two teams. That's a very high win percentage. Uh, we wanted to look at other games with high playoff stakes and high win percentage. Team history is a big factor as well. Is this a rivalry game, or is this the first time you've seen them in 7 years? What is the history behind the team? But that also goes into team history in terms of, is this a successful team, or is this just their first year being well? And then star power. How many Hall of Fame players, how many superstars are in this team? If you can find a game with high playoff stakes, high win percentage, great team history all around, and high star power, that's going to be your biggest game. So that's what we wanted to find.
So yeah, and moving on to this next page here, we've categorized some games that we think fit these criteria. We're gonna discuss a few of them, engage in some debate, some counter arguments here. But we have them listed chronologically, left to right, top to bottom. Um, and I don't know, how do you want to do this, Tyler? Do you just want me to jump into kind of the history of that first game, or and then we
So
can.
I don't necessarily want to break down every single game, but generally what we've got is we looked at the history, we've done our homework, and we do think that one way or the other, these 8 games all fit those 4 criteria very well.
So
We've
theoretically,
got
the greatest or
superstars in all of these.
the most anticipated regular season game exists within these 8 games. We've narrowed it down
Yes, I
basically.
think so. All 4 of these games have superstar power. The graphic right there that you see on the bottom, those are amazing Hall of Fame players. All of these guys played in these games. We've got Hall of Fame quarterback Johnny Unitas playing in 1967. We've got Brady versus Manning on here, Walter Payton versus Lawrence Taylor. We have Montana versus Aikman. We've got Aaron Rodgers in this. We have Justin Jefferson playing. All of these are Hall of Fame superstar players with great history, great rivalries, and very much these are games that are circled on the calendar the second the schedule gets released.
Yeah, so I
And
mean, all
so
yeah, all of these
I was gonna
games
say
made it.
what we could do is decide who our number one is and go into a debate from there.
Sure. I mean, all of
Go ahead
these
with what you were
games,
saying.
all of these games appeared on this list for a reason, and I kind of want to just highlight the main reason we included these games first before we jump into any debate, just so that we can at least touch on each game once. Um,
Absolutely.
So this first game, this Baltimore Colts versus Los Angeles Rams game in 1967, obviously a very old game featuring Johnny Unitas there. This game is on this list solely because of its playoff stakes. Obviously these are two double-digit win squads. However, back in the way the NFL was structured in the 60s, one of these teams was going to go home with with one of the best records in football. So that's the playoff stakes were extremely high for this game, and it's about probably the only one of the only games that has the highest playoff stakes here. I mean, certainly higher than some of these other ones. So that's why this one appears. Miami and Chicago, two of the highest win
Mhm.
percentage totals for a game post week 12. I mean, and it's star power. We've got Dan Marino versus Walter Payton and the '85 Bears, two iconic squads. Um, Giants and Niners in 1990, just another great win percentage, full of stars game. And then this Cowboys Giants game, this was actually a Week 18 game, and this is not a typo, although sometimes maybe Tyler and I are prone to typos. This is truly Week 18 because in 1993 the NFL was experimenting with an extra game at the end of the schedule with two buys, not an extra game, but an extra buy that extended the weeks. They immediately axed this
Why did they get
concept
rid of that?
because NFL team owners thought that the extra buy was disruptive to the teams. Um,
Interesting.
it seems interesting now because teams are clamoring for an extra buy, but this was the experiment with two buys. It did not
Hmm.
end up being successful. Um, Dallas Cowboys, San Francisco Niners game, a game that maybe a little bit early in the season, certainly featured two squads that most people expected to go deep into the playoffs in the NFC. Brady Manning, self-explanatory. Packers Lions, huge playoff implications and historic rivalry, and of course the marquee game, the game that started this debate, Vikings Lions. So Tyler, where do you want to go ahead and display your maybe your top game here on
Mhm.
this list and kind of tell me why you think it's the top?
Yeah, so all of these games are filled with star power for sure. The game that I can't get over though is Cowboys versus 49ers week 10. I know it's early, but week 10, 1994. I'll kind of go down the criteria a little bit and tell you why I think that is the biggest, most anticipated game. So, right off the bat, you've got two great records within that, but a lot of this is playoff implications, I think. Even though both of these teams are going to end up making the playoffs, you have the Dallas Cowboys coming off back to back Super Bowls. They are in a three-peat run season versus the San Francisco 49ers under a quarterback that has already won back to back. So you've got two teams that within the last 10 years have won back to back Super Bowls. Each team has won back to back Super Bowls. This is filled with team history. This is filled with star power. And a lot of people, even in week 10, are looking at this as to the winner of this game is probably going to host the NFC Championship. Being that both teams are clearly bound for the playoffs and are clearly bound for a collision course with each other later, this determines where the NFC Championship um, is located. Now, this is not me looking back years later and saying this. There are people talking about this at this point in time, also saying this. And so when you look at the game, it was the San Francisco 49ers who ended up winning this game. Flash forward to January, and you've got the game being held at Candlestick Park and the 49ers winning, ending the Cowboys' three-peat season. So the people that are talking about this game saying, hey, this game is huge, this game's going to determine the NFC Championship, were right. And so that's my evidence as to why it is the biggest game because the speculation behind it lived up to the hype, along with just the massive playoff implications and the superstardom. You've got Aikman versus Montana, two back to back Super Bowl winning quarterbacks on a collision course.
Sure. So little bit of I'm going to give you a little questions here about this game. of course, we're talking about the most anticipated game, so we have
Mhm.
to lean very little, if at all, on what happened afterwards, because a lot of these
Sure.
games didn't end up being as good as they were billed. They were typically described as overhyped. But this one maybe was one that was not overhyped. It definitely lived up to the expectations. It was a close game, but how can you put together a compilation of the most anticipated games and then say number one is a Week 10 matchup when one of these teams is a 3 game slide away from not even making the playoffs in the NFC? If Dallas would have won and San Fran had fallen to 7-3 and they lose 3 more games, they're out of the postseason. How can we declare that this game, even though both teams seemingly were on a collision course, we've seen all-time collapses from teams year in and year out. So an early game like this, I just don't understand how you can put it. Walk me through how an early game like this can, in fact, hold this title.
I wish that you and I had lived through the 90s so we can talk firsthand about how dominant both of these teams were, with the Cowboys and the Niners both being, I mean, we've got a dynasty happening with 2 teams in the same decade. So the likelihood of a 3-game slide for either of these teams is far less likely than them meeting again later. The anticipation around it, and even if it hadn't been correct, the anticipation around it was so high because you've got dynasty versus dynasty. Same thing with the game right below it. We've got Peyton Manning versus Tom Brady. It was week 9, but as you said in the intro, self-explanatory. It's Manning versus Brady. Week 10, it's Cowboys versus Niners. 2 back-to-back Super Bowl champions, and one of those teams was in their quest for a three-peat. So for me, I tried to set it up in a way that the team history is really the reason for the anticipation. The fact that that it lived up to the anticipated hype is just icing on the cake.
Gotcha. So another problem with this game that I see, at least assigning it the crown, is the win totals. Week 10, these teams already have 3 losses combined. And I know 3 losses is not that many. But when you look at another game on this list that happened 8 weeks later that had only 4 combined losses, obviously it's a very important game. But can you really say that its win percentage was that high? When
I see
compared
where
to
you're
other
going
games
with
on this
this.
list.
I see where you're going with that. And so I want to do some live research here. I want to pull up who the Cowboys had lost to that year. So I've got the game log of the Dallas Cowboys on my on my computer. And so going up to that week 10 game, the sole Cowboys loss was Monday Night Football against your team. It was a 17-20 loss in overtime leading up to that game.
It was an
For
overtime.
It was in overtime is what my computer is saying for the 1994 Cowboys. Now for the 49ers, I'm going to pull up the 1994 49ers schedule. Leading up to that, what I am currently seeing, the 49ers website would have this laid out horribly. Let me go to a different website. Here we go. We'll go back to Pro Football Reference for this one. Leading up to that game, you've got a loss to Philadelphia and a loss to and a loss to my team. So you do have a really bad fluke loss to the Eagles and then a close loss on the road in Kansas City. So 1994 uh 49ers, you've got 3 losses to, I think, good teams in my opinion. The Cowboys' sole loss was in overtime, so they're that much closer to being undefeated.
And that 94 Lions team was a rare Lions playoff team. So
Yes.
Their one
So
loss was
multiple
to.
playoff teams are who they are losing to.
Okay, so you're categorizing the losses as yes, the loss number is slightly high, or is fairly high for a game that's supposed to be most anticipated. I mean, compare it to the
Mm.
Week 13 matchup between Miami and Chicago. There's one combined loss between
I
these two squads 3 weeks later.
and I do have to correct a mistake that I said earlier. Earlier, I did start off with Montana versus Aikman.
This
This is
is
actually
young.
not true. This is actually Steve Young's time. But that being said, you've still got a lot of the same superstars around him, and you've actually got a lot of excitement around Steve Young. That does not change my argument towards the anticipation, but I do need to correct myself as 1994 was Steve Young, and one of those losses that the 49ers had was a
Was
loss to
versus
Joe
Joe
Montana. So
Montana.
we've was versus Joe Montana in Kansas City. So, but you've still got Jerry Rice, you've still got their dominant defense, that dominant coaching staff, versus a Troy Aikman team coming off a back-to-back Super Bowl win,
Gotcha. So you're saying that
back-to-back Super Bowl
the losses
championships.
are the losses are quality losses. The playoff
Yes, they are
stakes
to playoff teams.
the playoff stakes are high due to the team history, and then the team history is high because the two teams are in the middle of their most dominant stretch either team will ever have before or since. That's what you're saying. I mean,
Yes,
and nobody knew that the Cowboys and Niners would then go on to lose a lot of games post
no, literally.
1999. But yes, okay. So
So
that is your argument.
that's a summary of my argument is that these are two teams that have dominance at quarterback, defense, and coaching and offense. You've got two teams that have both won back to back Super Bowls within the decade. The anticipation is that you are going to expect these two teams, the winner of this game, to host the NFC Championship. It's just icing on the cake that that is correct.
Sure. So my then pick, if it's not obvious by the jersey that I am currently wearing, is this Week 18 game. I bought into the hype, okay? And maybe this is because it's quite literally the greatest season the Lions have ever had, and one of the greatest seasons the Vikings have ever had. I know they've had a couple better, or equivalent, maybe not better, but 2 14-2 teams has never happened before. It was the highest winning percentage of two teams facing in the final week in NFL history. And the winner would get the 1 seed, which has an overwhelming majority of Super Bowl championships. 1 seed does, and the loser would go all the way down to the 5th seed because of the way the NFL, a 14-win team would go play in the wild card. So I just thought those playoff stakes, Lions had never held a number 1 seed before. Um, it's a division rivalry game. It determines the division crown in Week 18 between two 14-win teams. It features a ridiculous amount of Pro Bowlers. I think it was like 6 Pro Bowlers on the Lions, and then something like 7 Pro Bowlers on the Vikings. Just an absurd amount of talent on either side. Obviously, we can't see who's Hall of Fame level yet, like we can with the Week 10 matchup in '94, but we can anticipate that some of those players for either team, like Jefferson, Panay Sewell, St. Brown, all these guys will eventually make their way inch closer to that title. Um, but for those reasons, I just think it excels in every category. The stakes were high, the star power was big, the win percentage was off the charts, quite literally, and you can't get much better than a division rivalry for the crown.
I- My question, as you point out, it's the only time that two 14-win teams have faced each other. So I cannot argue on the win percentage whatsoever. This is absolutely the best win percentage. Weirdly enough, in our previous debates, even going back to that 85 Bears and Dolphins game, only one loss between the two of them. When you look at win percentages, it is higher. It is the highest win percentage.
Sure.
Playoff stakes, I mean, if I'm talking about the playoff stakes being hosting of the NFC Championship, I can't argue too much on the playoff stakes 1 seed because one of these teams won't even host. My question is a little bit of star power and team history, though. I'm not saying that the players on that team have not been phenomenal last year, but can you say that Jared Goff versus Sam Darnold is the most anticipated game in NFL history?
I think that you can, solely because of the teams that they play for. Listen, this is could be a controversial statement, but I'm going to say it. Troy Aikman is not as good of a quarterback as everyone says he is. You
I
look at his
agree with that. You're not
you
going to
look
find
at
an
his
argument with me on that.
statistics. I mean, it was always a funny joke. Uh, I mean, both of us live in Kansas City, in the Kansas City area. It was always a fun joke to laugh about how many statistics of Troy Aikman Patrick Mahomes was eclipsing in like year 4. I think there was even a viral quote tweet by Aikman. Is like, let me know when he has like 75% of my Super Bowls.
He said the quote I know exactly what quote you're talking about. They said that Patrick Mahomes, the first tweet was Patrick Mahomes has gotten 33% or no, something about 75% of Troy Aikman's stats and only 33% of the time. And Troy Aikman quoted him and said, "Call me when he has 33% of my Super Bowls." And now years later, Patrick Mahomes has 100% of his Super Bowls.
Yeah, and so there was always a joke that Aikman wasn't all that he lived up to be. Now Young undoubtedly is a deserving player. He had a ridiculous run,
Sure.
the best left-handed quarterback in NFL history, and it's not even close. But when you look at Goff and Darnold, it's less that the quarterbacks, and it's unfortunate because if these two teams featured Matthew Stafford and another good Vikings quarterback, that it's like, or if it was like Stafford Rogers or another high marketability quarterback matchup, it would be unquestioned that this is the game of the year, like game of the most anticipated game of the entire NFL history. Um, but I just think it loses marketability because the stars for the Lions were some of its defenders and its offensive line, and the stars for the Vikings were its receiver and its edge rushers. I mean, and Harrison Smith maybe. So there's a lot of star power in terms of number of Pro Bowls among both rosters, but in terms of like names that are superstars in the NFL, it's really just Justin Jefferson and Amon-Ra St. Brown, honestly.
And that's part of kind of my argument against it as well, because even coaching wise, you've got Dan Campbell, wonderful coach. I think it's too early to say Hall of Famer, but you can't discredit it by any means at all, especially if he does go and win Detroit Super Bowl. But on the flip side, with that 94 Cowboys team, we've got Jimmy Johnson's squad. The head coach was Barry Switzer, but you've got Jimmy Johnson's squad. That's what people always said, was that it was Jimmy Johnson's squad still, and Barry Switzer. So we've got two Hall of Fame coaches within there. We've got Dan Campbell, again, way too early to discredit. He's not. But with the other side, we've got we've got Kevin O'Connell.
2024 Coach of the Year? Coach of the
I
year?
under
You're
I
saying
understand.
he has more
I
hardware than Dan Campbell
understand, but we've
does.
had this same debate of he's not a Hall of Fame coach, though. He had a great this year.
Kevin O'Connell's been a
I
phenomenal
doubt
coach of
Kevin
the
O'Connell's
Vikings.
ability.
He has won games with Kirk Cousins and Sam Darnold at the helm. If you're going to argue the quarterback thing, Kevin O'Connell has been a quarterback whisperer in his time in Minnesota, and his playoff success is limited. On his resume, a loss to Daniel Jones, but in the regular season, it's undoubtable that he's one of the best coaches in football. So,
When?
in my opinion, the
When?
coaching battle is equal
When is he good?
in the regular season, and
In the regular season.
we're talking about the most anticipated
But
regular season in a game in NFL
I
history.
understand that. But we know in our minds, Kevin O'Connell is only good at coaching in the regular season. No one was saying, at least I wasn't anyway, was that if the Vikings win this game and they become the 1 seed, the Vikings will go on to win the Super Bowl.
No, no one was saying that.
No one was saying
However,
that.
you
People
have
were
a
talking about the Lions doing that. People were not talking about the Vikings doing that.
that's fair. They were honestly billing it kind of as a quasi playoff game solely because the Lions were so banged up. Can they really win 3 games and get to the Super Bowl? The reality is they couldn't win one, and it was a playoff matchup for the Vikings. Was because Kevin O'Connell can't win in the playoffs. He needs that 1 seed just to have that extra advantage, that extra week of preparation.
Sure.
Both teams were bounced in the first round, so the hindsight does point to your game. But I just cannot discount two
But even
14 win
taking out
teams.
hindsight,
Yeah,
I this is definitely the biggest game in Lions history for sure. But in terms of the biggest game in general, because I don't see anyone talking about it for the Vikings. It was like the Lions need if the Lions want to win the Super Bowl, they've got to win this game. I fully agree with that. But it was kind of one of those things to where if it was all about it was all about the Lions storyline. I don't think anyone was talking about the Viking storyline. If the Lions win this game, their path to the Super Bowl's right there. If the Lions lose this game, they can't win the Super Bowl. The Vikings were just the team to stop you or not. While with the 94 Cowboys and 49ers, it was, we know these squads can go win the Super Bowl. This is their step for both of them getting there.
sure. It's it's just difficult for me to give it to a week 10 matchup. That's what I'm hung up on that. You had a
And I
decent
understand that.
you had a
I
decent
understand
argument where
that.
you said, something along the lines of a these two teams meeting in the NFC Championship is more likely than them having a slide in the regular season, and that's completely fair. It ended up happening, but the stakes were just so much more concrete and palpable for the Week 18 2024 game. Like you knew at 11:45 that evening because they flexed this game into Sunday night or Monday night. I don't know which one it is. It was one of the primetime slots. You
It was Sunday
knew.
night. Week 18 only does Sunday night.
Gotcha. So you knew Sunday night at 11:45 p.m. which team was moving on to the first round bye in the divisional round and which team wasn't. There was still a lot of uncertainty even after the Cowboys fell to San Francisco. I mean, there was a tiebreaker there. So all if I mean, if the Niners lost one more game and the Dallas won out, they would still have the 1 seed. And both teams
Hmm.
still had the opportunity to get a bye. That's the thing that we haven't mentioned yet. In the 1990s, two teams got a first round bye. And I believe both of these teams won their division and got the bye.
I
This
believe that is correct.
this week 18 game determined the division, the only first round bye, and just the playoff stakes were there. It was the playoffs were next week. It would determine who had to play a football game the next Sunday, basically. So, in my
My
opinion, the stakes are higher because of that lack of another first round bye.
my final argument, and I do agree with you. I don't disagree with you when it comes to the playoff stakes maybe being slightly higher just because the one team had to go play a road playoff game. But my last argument that I want to throw out, and I'll let you rebuttal this, is on top of the playoff implications of who could host. This is also Steve Young's second year as a starter. His first year as a starter in 1993, the Cowboys went on to win their second straight Super Bowl, and Montana went on that year to lead the Chiefs to an AFC Championship appearance. Going into 1994, you know these squads can do well, but it's also anticipation for Steve Young. It's, can Steve Young take on the Cowboys, or is he just going to win the division, get an NFC Championship appearance, and then lose to the Cowboys each time? And this showed. It eventually showed, but this is both a playoff test, a playoff implications, and a Steve Young test. And so I think there are two or three storylines all colliding that people want to watch to see what happens in this game. And that is my final argument before your rebuttal, and then I give it to the comments.
Yeah, I do want to see if there's any other games on this list that the comments think you're completely overlooking. The Baltimore Colts Los Angeles Rams 1967 matchup. I was alive for this game. I watched it in person.
My
Uh,
students think I was alive for this game, but
it is hilarious that one of your students asked you if you remembered when the Colts were in Baltimore. But
that was nuts. I'm
yeah.
25, by the way, for our viewers. I had a student ask if I remember the Baltimore Colts, who have not been the Baltimore Colts since the early 1980s.
Yeah. So my I don't necessarily have a rebuttal for that because we don't have as much hindsight as we do that 94 game. If it goes to look in 10 years down the line, Dan Campbell has 3 Super Bowls and Kevin O'Connell has 2, and Jared Goff is a multi-time MVP quarterback, and Sam Darnold goes on to win a crap ton more games and a career revival with another team. We could look back at this game and it's like, man, we did not know what we had back week 18,
That's
2024.
fair, and that's why I didn't diss on Campbell when I mentioned the coaching. I was like, it's way too early to say Campbell's not a Hall of Famer.
Yeah,
You can say he's a Hall of Famer. I can say he's not, and we both have the same amount of evidence.
right. And so it's unfortunate that we it's honestly it's kind of a tie in terms of the anticipation, and what's breaking the tie is the storylines and the anticipation, um almost subconsciously. But I do think that in history the Vikings Lions game will be remembered as more of a stakes driven biggest game. Like this upcoming game is really big because I didn't see anyone mentioning that 1994 game. I saw people mentioning this game because of
Mhm.
the division championship implications. It was, and
Mhm.
I saw people mentioning this game, this Week 18 game, because once again, division championship was on the line, and that's extremely important for a lot of squads. So, but
And that
either
might be a
way,
game I overlooked also. My love for the Cowboys Niners rivalry might have kind of blinded me on a couple of the games.
yeah, I mean that was the
I'll
this
admit my potential bias.
this is the last time that a regular season finale featured two teams with the number 1 seed on the line. This game, that was it. Meaning the winner would get the 1 seed. I mean there has been games in which one team could clinch the 1 seed, and if another team won it, they would get the 2 seed and get a bye. But this was the last time that the 1 seed was on the line. This Cowboys Giants game, and of course, it ended up being Dallas who won it. Obviously, knowing what happened in '94, they went on to get the bye, win the championship that year. But it's very rare that you see two teams vying for the 1 seed, and the fact that it was two teams with the combined win total of a Week 18 game ever, because these teams both still had 8 losses apiece.
Mhm.
The Dallas Cowboys in this game had the same amount of losses as the Vikings and Lions combined. And that was the last time that a game was played for the 1 seed. It's just unfathomable that we even had this Vikings Lions game in the first place. This game was so impactful that there are proposals to change the way the seeding of the playoff works to prevent this from ever happening again. I rest my case there because both games are extremely impactful, and for a lot of reasons. But we have a
I
little bit
think
of extra time if you wanted to cover some anticipated games for this upcoming season and maybe
yeah,
tease,
absolutely.
you know, perhaps a game that could be attended by the cast of That's DPI.
Well, so that's what I was gonna say is I think we've got some time to talk about our teams and the schedule coming up. May 14th is when they are going to release that. That will be released before the recording and posting of our next episode. So we'll cover all of that next time on That's DPI. But before we do go, yeah, let's talk about the schedule. The most anticipated game for me is actually a game that I know I'm not going to be at. It is the road game for Chiefs at Bills. It's been an AFC Championship rematch from last year, from 2020. It's a playoff rematch from the last 4 years, really. I think that's absolutely gonna be the most anticipated Chiefs game. Zach teased the idea of a That's DPI podcast on location. We are looking at going to a Buffalo Bills game this year. For my safety, I refuse to go to that Chiefs game. I will say that. I really want to experience Bills Mafia as a member of the Bills Mafia for that week, and I can't do that if the Chiefs are in town. Buffalo and Philadelphia are two places that I will not go to as an opposing fan. But in terms of the Chiefs schedule, the Chiefs will play at Bills. We just don't know where or what time, or excuse me, we don't know when or what time until May 14th. Zach, what about the Lions? Which game are you most anticipating?
So it's easily going to be the game we were robbed of last season. Due to a multitude of injuries sustained in the weeks leading up to and during the Lions divisional playoff game versus the Washington Commanders, we did not get to see whether Dan Campbell's injury riddled Lions would have beaten the Philadelphia Eagles that went on to win that Super Bowl. That game will be played in Lincoln Financial Field this season. Lions at Eagles, although it would have been the other way around had the Lions won. But we are going to get to see pretty much the same squad. I know the Eagles have lost some pieces, but the Lions had no pieces. So we're going to see that matchup. Honestly, that's the one I want to see happen. And through the rumor mill, I believe that
I was
this
about to
game
ask about
will
that.
be opening night, Thursday night football at the
Oh,
Link,
man.
banner night for Philadelphia. The Lions love to ruin banner nights. They've done it in the past.
Don't remind me, Zach.
They love to ruin banner nights, and I would be very stoked if they ruined the Philadelphia Eagles banner night to open the season. And that's where I think, based on NFL schedule making, where that game's most likely to appear. But as far as most anticipated Lions games, we do have a rematch, I believe, with the Washington Commanders. That one's going to be
That'll
interesting.
be a
I
good
want to see
game.
if healthy we can kick those dudes' butts because I think we can. But how about you, Tyler? Is
I
there
want to
any
throw out one more
anticipated?
game. Of course, the Bills game, but at home, I am anticipating a house divided between That's DPI podcast.
Oh yes.
Your Lions are coming to Arrowhead.
Oh my goodness. It is a game that I so hope that I can be in attendance at. I watched the Lions when they came here in the preseason, and they won on a last second field goal made by little known kicker at the time, Jake Bates. It was a raucous preseason game, as raucous as they can be. So, definitely a house divided. That episode leading up to it will be the most anticipated game for the DPI cast for sure.
And Chiefs Twitter does not like the Lions.
Oh
I
no.
have no problem with the Lions, but Chiefs Twitter does not like the Lions. So that's going to be a rockin' day at Arrowhead
And
also.
honestly, Lions Twitter doesn't really care about Chiefs Twitter. We have other teams that we hate a lot more, i.e., Packers and Eagles, honestly. Uh, 49ers, to name a couple. But we have no qualms with the Chiefs. I mean, we've beat them every time we played them in this decade. So there's no reason for the Lions to have beef with the Chiefs at this point, besides the fact that you guys win a ton.
And honestly, I don't really understand the beef between the Lions and the Chiefs. I don't. All right, let me go back. I don't understand the beef that Chiefs fans have with the Lions. The only thing the Lions have done was ruin Banner Night for us. I really do think, and I can kind of relate to this. I do think Lions fans were not nice to Chiefs fans that night, and I think that's all it comes down to. Beyond just cheering, I think a lot of fans experienced negative Lions fans.
Well, the Lions fans were the ones being positive. The Chiefs just had the fans had the negative experience. They were positive about their team.
Well, being negative to the Chiefs fans. So the thing that upset me the most with that game, because I'm on staff at Arrowhead, and so I'm at every single game, and on there, week one, I had after the game was over. The Chiefs are having their banner night. They just dropped their Super Bowl banner. And a Lions fan turns to me and he, in all seriousness, he says, might as well just give us the trophy right now. and that bothered me more than I think it should have,
And
but
see,
that bothered
that
me.
is the tamest trash talk I've ever heard at a stadium.
It
And
is, and it is,
and
but
the
I think
Lions
there's
got a
just a
division
lot of
championship that
excuse
year. They were a
on
drop
that.
interception away from a Super Bowl championship. I mean, the Lions would have beat you again if they played if they had beat the Niners. Niners took you to OT. We should have beat them in regulation. But that is so tame compared to what some other fans in the NFC
It It
are
is, but
capable of
I say
doing.
that experience because I didn't with me working at Arrowhead, I didn't really get to feel the crowd the way a fan would. But that's the only thing I can think of as to why Chiefs Twitter really hates the Detroit Lions is it has to be fan interactions. But
Yeah, I mean,
um
it sucks when the only team in the NFL that has your number this decade comes to town. But I'm doing a lot of.
weird that Patrick Mahomes is 0-3 against Jared
It
Goff.
is funny.
That makes no sense.
Jared Goff is the Eli Manning.
No,
Eli Manning
literally.
is to Tom Brady as Jared Goff is to Patrick Mahomes in this modern era of the NFL. Just a weird. If only Jared Goff can get the two Super Bowls that Eli Manning has, I'll be a happy man. But
Right, and
um,
then there is a Super Bowl rematch at Arrowhead as well. So those are my 3 that I'm anticipating is, Lions at Chiefs, Eagles at Chiefs, and then, Chiefs at Bills.
Gotcha. So lots to be excited about. Tyler and I will be back on the air next week talking about. I will be in a brand new apartment talking about which NFL teams, which games, how the schedule falls out. We will be covering the schedule release on May 14th and talking about, which predictions were right by some of the folks on the internet and which games, maybe ones that we want to attend on location. But that's all we have for you tonight. Thanks for tuning in. Let us know in the comments which game you think was the biggest, most anticipated regular season game, and we'll see you after the schedule release next week. Thanks, guys.
Appreciate you guys.